Alright, so I'm scared of death. I don't think of the physical pain, and I'm not worried about a hell or some equivalent. I'm terrified of death being nothing more than a complete shutdown of my brain and a memory wipe of my consciousness. I hate the thought of not knowing I even died. If that's what death is like, no one will ever know, and even though I wouldn't be aware of it anymore, the idea of losing all of my cherished memories and never being able to experience an emotion again makes me sad. Despite this, I keep on researching and seeing all kinds of things on the internet that kind of make it worse. But I can't help it because I've always been curious. My intention is to come across mind-puzzling stories that make me think about stuff, but sometimes I stumble upon something that really sticks with me, and it's not always in a completely pleasant way. r/glitch in the matrix is a subreddit where people share their unexplainable experiences, from encounters with people who seem like NPCs to cats not obeying by the laws of physics, or a family member just seeming off. But some of the most compelling are those that have to do with death, specifically near-death experiences. Today I'm going to be sharing a story that has never really left my mind since I read it. Something about it bothers me, but I still find it incredibly fascinating. This video is going to be darker and longer than anything I've done yet. And let me preface by saying, I do find it hard to believe this was 100% a real experience, and I find it way more interesting as a concept of sorts. I also just don't want this to be the answer to death. It was posted to Glitch in the Matrix in March of 2017, the original source being from a near-death experience research foundation. Let's get right into it. A friend persuaded me to submit this account against my natural tendency on the matter. I have no real interest in following it up or being contacted in any way. It was a very frightening episode. It is traumatic enough, to be honest, to recall it just once at length here. But having set out to describe it, I will be as frank and as accurate as language can allow. On the 15th July 2013 at about 7:45 a.m., I was on my way to work and approaching the intersection and getting ready to take a left-hand turn. This is a notoriously dangerous intersection on any day, and there have been many accidents there. It is hard to see if the intersection is clear from the right, and the left turn is particularly hazardous. I was running late and in a flustered state of mind. I had an important meeting that I'd been planning for carefully over a number of days, and a really stupid delay at the last minute put all of that in jeopardy. It should also be understood that a much better traffic signal system exists there today than what was in place at the time of this incident. I approached the intersection in a hurry. I looked to the right and believed that I had correctly viewed that nothing was approaching from the right, so I made the left turn. As I crossed the intersection, I glanced right once more and saw a vehicle heading straight for me at what could only have been in excess of 90 miles per hour. We saw each other. I saw the look in the other guy's eyes because we were that close. A collision was absolutely inevitable. There is no way on earth that this could have been avoided. What happens next is extremely difficult to describe, but I will do my best. And this can be and must be taken to apply to everything that I am going to attempt to relate from this point onwards. Words, even the most carefully chosen words, capture no more than 1% of this experience at best, and even then very poorly. This is quite possibly the most frustrating thing about giving this account. Across from the front of the car on the left, in almost the opposite direction to the oncoming vehicle, was a field. I suddenly became aware of a very large object approaching slowly on a diagonal across this field. It was coming directly towards my car. Time was not functioning normally while this was happening, if it was functioning at all. I had the space to notice this happening, but I can't explain how I was able to do that. The object, when I first saw it, appeared to be about the size of a 10-floor tower block. It subjectively seemed to be about 200 or 300 yards across the field. These sizes and distance descriptions are meaningless, as I'll try to explain in a moment. The object resembled a giant water wheel lying on its side and rotating as it approached me and my vehicle. As it got closer, this didn't take time as we understand it. I saw that my first observation about its size was wildly inaccurate. It was more like the size of a small city. As it got closer still, I understood that all scale and distance estimates were meaningless. It was larger than what we think of as the world. As it approached me, I became aware of its power and significance. My mind interpreted this as being an up-close, giant-scale physical object. Okay, now this part is particularly difficult to explain. As the object drew near to me, a kind of sensation came over my person, and I knew exactly what this thing was. Not only that, but I knew everything that pertained to it, what it was doing, what its business was with me, where and when I had seen it before, why I was seeing it now, and many, many other things that I cannot now recall. I had seen the object before I was born, and I will see it again when I die. We all knew it before we were born, we will all see it when we die. But this information is eclipsed from us while we are alive, and that was why I was seeing it now in the experience, because I was in the process of dying in a fatal car crash. Here's what I remember as best as words can tell. This wheel wasn't something that moved towards me through the world or through reality somehow. That was an illusion that my senses were constructing for me. This wheel was reality itself. It represented every conceivable possibility for a life or for a world that could ever be envisioned or imagined. As it approached, I became aware that what we call our world was contained within it. It was simply one of the numberless slots or paddles in the water wheel. It had always been so. My life, your life, our world, all of us, we were a part of this wheel structure, and we had always been a part of this structure. It simply now made itself visible to me. There then began the truly terrifying dimension of this experience. Words cannot even begin to describe the level of fear I experienced. The water wheel sort of rolled across me and then across the place where my car was in the road. As it did so, I began to be hit by each of the paddles in the wheel. Remember that all of this is just a way of talking. It does not and cannot remotely describe the real situation as it actually was. But some sense of it can be had by imagining that in the space of each paddle, there was a kind of spinning film of water like a waterfall on its side. Imagine a film of water being thrown outward from the wheel in each slot as if by centrifugal force. Imagine being slapped or splashed by each of these films as you collide with it and pass through it to the next one. This is what was happening, except these weren't just films of water, they were, for want of a better term, possible realities of what we might think of as universes or worlds. Again, our world, our entire universe as we normally think of it, was simply one among an infinite number of these. How did I know that there was an infinite number? I just did. A kind of knowing came with the event, and there was no doubting this knowing. It was so, and I knew it was so. And because I had knowledge and understood what was happening in ways I can no longer communicate, I was afraid. I understood that I was about to be subject to the process that humans approximated with the term reincarnation. This was why the wheel had come. I represented a kind of discrepancy that had to be fixed. The event, or perhaps the imminent event, on the highway had caused me to slip out of or fall between the paddles of the wheel. This structure had some kind of cosmic purpose of sorting things into the correct natural place. I was afraid and resisted being sorted, so the wheel stepped up its aggressive attempts to sort me correctly. With this came another understanding that frightened me even more. I knew that unless I soon selected one of these realities to slide back into, that the wheel would coerce the situation by deciding for me. One way or another, I would be sorted whether I liked it or not. If I didn't choose for myself, I would simply be fitted into place at some nearest position on the wheel to the point where I failed to make the decision, if that makes sense. I was aware of having a limited ability to choose, but not much. Even that limited ability wasn't much use because each reality slammed against me and threw me before I could make much sense of what it contained. Even I did not remain the same from one slot in the wheel to the next. It was as if when each film broke over me, I was destroyed and made again from the ground up as a completely new self. There was no continuous me that traveled unaltered through that wheel and could somehow report back on this experience. This is just one of the many things that is so very hard to explain. The very idea of a continuous self was contradicted by this experience. I have forgotten, or perhaps it was deliberately suppressed, the vast majority of what I saw in the various universes or paddles of the wheel. At the beginning, they seemed very similar to this world we inhabit or believe ourselves to inhabit. For example, I have a floating memory of seeing various different scenarios of how the accident played out. I suspect that these were all nearby paddles on the wheel. In one of them, I remember seeing what looked like my vehicle thrown right off the road and so badly damaged that it looked like it had been folded in the center like a pocket knife. I seem to recall many other scenarios like this that I can no longer remember. To clarify, what I mean is that I seem to file or flip through numerous conceivable quantum possibilities for the outcome of the accident. I can remember doing this, but I cannot remember what any of these particular worlds contained. I have no explanation for why I failed to experience any of the phenomena usually reported with the imminent death situations like the tunnel, the light, and so on. I suspect that imminent death experiences are symbolic scenarios that flash up just as someone is entering or exiting the wheel, but before the situation has developed very far. At no stage did I see anything whatever that resembled what we humans would think of as an afterlife or spirit world or life after death realm. It's as if we are either on the outer surface of the wheel itself, in one of its realized worlds, or else we are dead and we are the wheel itself. The wheel is a space where all uncreated possibility exists, but nothing completed or actual. And bear in mind that nothing was concealed from me. I was the all and knew the all. I certainly don't retain it or pretend to do, but I knew it then. I began to grow extremely panicked. Each time I thought I was just beginning to get a handle on things, I would be slapped over violently and ruthlessly into a new slot in the wheel, and a whole new me would crystallize along with all the memories and assumptions that went along with that world. I remembered none of who I was just a moment ago in another paddle on the wheel. I had no memory whatsoever of where I had come from or the highway situation in my world. I had zero memory of that world. I knew I had come from a somewhere, but had no recollection of where that was or even who I was. It was about the most bizarre thing you could imagine. Somehow though, and I can only assume that it happened without any conscious action on my part, the possibilities appearing in the wheel began to narrow down and become somewhat more familiar again. Scenarios associated with the accident began to appear once more. I say once more, but I have no real way of knowing whether this was a separate incidence of this to what I described above, or whether it was really the same incidence because time was functioning so unusually during the whole episode. Again, I saw or seemed to see variations of possible world outcomes where I died in the crash. I seemed to understand intuitively that if I went into any of these, I would be there for only a few moments or minutes at most, and then I would have to come out and face the wheel again almost immediately. I didn't want to do this. But there was an odd kind of knowing associated with that too. The wheel didn't seem bothered one way or the other. It didn't seem to matter to it whether I emerged again in 3 minutes time or 3 decades time. All it cared about was sorting me, and there was a kind of ruthlessness to this that I will not soon forget. I found myself back on the highway in what seemed to be a very short distance back up the road, still approaching the intersection. This is just one of the many mysteries associated with the event that I cannot explain. Did I choose a world which was a version of our universe in which the accident hadn't quite happened yet, but was just seconds away from happening? I can't say because I have no memory of making that decision. I remember the look on that driver's face as clearly as if it were yesterday. I remember him bracing back on the wheel, but I braked as I reached the intersection, and that driver, or his car, were simply nowhere to be seen. It's kind of a lot to take in and really decide how you feel about it, at least for me. Naturally, I went to the comments. Ah, yes, the Wheel of Fortune. Not the game show, the one referred to in the tarot. Maybe it is a literal thing. Maybe Buddhism's concept of nirvana is to escape the wheel in the cycle of rebirth? Sounds similar to the Wheel of Samsara. Are you familiar with it? Could this be the same wheel that Ezekiel tried to describe? Oh wow, this reminds me of this story. Guy trips on salvia and experiences this wheel, but instead of paddles extending outwards, they were arms. Such a terrifying prospect of what may occur when we die. Old Testament angels are often described in a way that sounds like they were giant wheels, no joke. I can imagine and hear the wheel as you described with an odd familiarity. It disturbed me how that comment sort of resonated with me, but more on that later. It was obvious there was a lot to question, consider, and try to get to the bottom of, so I started my research. Based on the comments of the original post, we already have tarot cards, Buddhism, Hebrew prophets, Christian angels, salvia trips, and a strange familiarity. It seems this wheel theme is reoccurring in different belief systems, experiences, and more. It's only gonna get weirder, but let's take it one by one. The Wheel of Fortune tarot card is supposed to represent the Wheel of Life and is considered one of the most symbolic tarot cards. The center is the wheel itself, and it's surrounded by an angel, eagle, bull, and lion. These all represent both zodiac signs and the four evangelists in Christianity. The books represent the Torah, the snake's meaning is the material world, and there are these two Egyptian figures which are representative of wisdom in the underworld. They are rotating forever in a cycle and suggest that as one comes up, the other goes down. The Wheel of Fortune turns ever more, seemingly to communicate that life is made up of both good and bad times, and that the cycle is one that we cannot control. It is something that is subjected to both kings and workers, and that nobody on earth can avoid what's fated. When you have good moments in your life, make sure that you enjoy to the fullest, for what comes up must always go down. The same is true in reverse. When you are in a bad situation, things will eventually become better again. Greater forces that are outside of human control are at work here. The same forces that govern the changing of the seasons or the rising and setting of the sun is also the master of luck and the fate of individuals. Where it lands is as random as chance. You may find yourself at either the top or the bottom. But remember that no matter what the outcome, it may not last for very long, for the wheel always turns. Now, there are two main wheels in Buddhism. One is the Wheel of Dharma, but this is more of a symbolism than a belief. The other is samsara, which is what we're mainly going to be focusing on. Samsara is, in simple terms, the cycle of death and rebirth. In Buddhism, the whole point is to reach nirvana so you can escape this cycle, because samsara is the indefinite repeat of birth, misery, and death, all caused by karma. So what these users meant is there's a possibility that the wheel this guy saw when he nearly died is what Buddhists believe to be samsara. Then I learned it's not just Buddhism that holds this belief, but other Indian religions like Hinduism, for example. So the wheel theme expands more. And this user mentioned Ezekiel, who was a Hebrew prophet that told a story of when he had his own vision of a wheel experience. He described it as a wheel within wheels, like a gyroscope, and said there were 4 creatures that had 4 faces each, and yeah, this is when it gets confusing. But what caught my eye is supposedly these faces were that of a man, lion, ox, and eagle, which sounds suspiciously similar to an angel, lion, bull, and eagle. And I'm pretty sure user Magical Bunny was referring to Ezekiel's vision. So let's move on to the salvia trips. Salvia is a plant that you can consume in various ways to experience hallucinogenic or psychedelic effects from. It's a drug and it can cause freaky shit. And I guess seeing a wheel that is almost exactly like this man's near-death experience is a common thing with salvia use. I mean, searching the term wheel in the salvia subreddit brings up all of these posts. It'd be simply too much to cover all in one video, and I'm truthfully more into the curiosity of death and mystery glitchy side than the spirituality, religion, or psychedelic trip side. But these all needed to be brought up regarding this wheel story. And everything kept leading to another. You know, it wasn't just Buddhism, it was a bunch of other religions or beliefs. It wasn't just salvia, it was other psychedelic drugs. What was it about this wheel? Did it hold truth after all, or was it nothing more than a wheel is an easy metaphor for a lot of things? Was I overthinking all of this? I'm sure it was somewhere in between, but it was hard to stop looking into it once I had already began to. It obviously had the same effect on other people. Something about this story and the possibilities were so captivating, and you didn't really know if you were into it because it terrified you or because you thought it was amazing. Posts led to posts, comments led to comments, articles led to articles, and it kept going on. I'd learned things I had never known before, thought different ideas about the world, and heard so many different experiences. Then a comment by user Wayne Forrest made me remember something that I hadn't yet realized during this journey of research. Ever since I was a child, I would randomly get this feeling / vague imagery / weight / slight memory kind of sensation, just out of reach from me. It would only happen while I was laying down in bed, but only while I was still awake. Not in a dream state, not even drifting off. It's not an image flashing in my mind as I fall asleep. It's just this kind of cloudy, vague fading in of something, and the only thing that I can identify about it is that it's oval shaped and big, like bigger than my brain can imagine or comprehend. Like it's vast in every way possible, heavy but also weightless somehow. I've never been able to pinpoint what it is that I'm experiencing, and it only comes to me for like a second before it gently fades out, but it also has that odd familiarity to it. It happens every now and again to this day, still confused what it could be, but when I think too hard about when it happens, it's always just out of reach, it seems. It feels like a vague memory, but also not a memory at all in a way. I've never actually even spoken about it before, but it makes me kind of wonder if this is related to knowing the wheel before I was born, etc. I don't know, it's just strange and it makes me wonder. Maybe it's the wheel laying on its side, like mentioned above, which makes me experience it as more oval-shaped. I'm confused, but very curious to read about this. Also, this is probably the strangest thing I've ever written out. Maybe you were like, what does that mean? But I was like, holy shit, this paragraph just explains something that used to happen to me when I was little that I used to not be able to describe, let alone attempt to. Then I was like, oh shit, is the wheel real? Is reincarnation real? Am I just doomed to this fate? I mentioned in my liminal space video that I hope reincarnation isn't real, and it's because I don't like thinking that I'm just going to lose all the people and things I care about or my identity as a person only to become another person. It makes it feel meaningless to me, and thinking about past life me having that same thought just makes me feel uncomfortable. I've spent nights reading endless near-death experiences or theories on what happens after death, trying to make myself be content with it, but obviously I'm never going to get an answer from the internet. If death is nothing, I'm never going to get an answer at all. But I keep going down the rabbit holes anyway. It is fun and thought-provoking though, and I love finding out about all these different types of things. You just can't help but want to find the answers regardless. This story and the deep dive that followed is one of the most bothersome yet fascinating things I've come across. I enjoyed every bit of it, even if I don't want to entertain the idea that we're just beings in an endless cycle of life and death. I'd like to believe we're not meaningless meat sacks. Too many things have happened in my life so far that make me think we aren't, but I honestly don't know what I think death is or what could happen after it. And hypothetically speaking, if the wheel were in fact true, wouldn't that already mean we are somewhat more than just brain activity inside of a body? This story also probably stuck out because there was a time I was a passenger in a car that spun out in the snow, and there was a car coming towards us, but we miraculously hit nothing, not even a curb, and everything was okay. I didn't see a wheel though. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I know it's a bit different than my previous ones, but I wanted to do something more mysterious, dark, and longer than usual in honor of you all getting me to 1,000 subscribers. I genuinely appreciate it, and I would love to hear any of your experiences or opinions on the story of the wheel and all of the possibilities behind it. Thank you.